Big day, you guys. Today is April 16th. Taxes were yesterday. Today's a brand new day. If you live in DC, or even if you don't live in DC, you should all celebrate today because today is called a DC Emancipation Day. This is a very important part of the history of DC that I'm going to tell you briefly about. So I just recorded a dance video for today featuring this guy right here. So this guy is Dred Scott. So Dred Scott was born in 1799, and in the early 1800s, he was actually born into slavery, and there was a person who owned him as a slave. In the early 1800s, slaves were not considered people; they were considered property, otherwise known as chattel. So this man, Dred Scott, he was actually sold as a piece of property, and eventually he happened to marry a woman who was also a slave. They had children. It was so interesting because Dred Scott knew that he didn't want to be a slave anymore, and he tried to pay his owner some money so that he could gain his freedom. That didn't work. Because that didn't work, he continued his fight for freedom by suing them. And the lawsuit went into several stages in the Missouri court system. Eventually, it reached the United States Supreme Court, which is the highest level you can get. And in 1857, unfortunately, the United States Supreme Court ruled against Dred Scott. They said that no, he was not able to have his freedom as a slave because the court ruled African descendants were considered to be not United States citizens, which makes no sense, but this is part of our history. Okay, so just a couple years later, back in 1862, the District of Columbia, seeing what had happened with Dred Scott and, with other slaves that were going on, they passed this fantastic piece of legislation called the DC Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862. Those are a lot of words. Basically, what that means is they had abolished slavery, officially, legally abolished slavery. They freed 3,100 people who were considered slaves. They freed them. These chains are considered very symbolic of what slaves had to go through. So today is such an important day to celebrate and commemorate, and just to reflect and say, you know what? I'm so thankful to have freedom today because of people like Dred Scott who fought for his freedom, didn't have his freedom, lost their freedom, but then it was given to other people who were freed as slaves. So today's a fantastic day to remember and say thanks so much for freedom.